everybody, welcome to the South Florida Bitcoin Citadel live stream events channel, whatever we're calling it. The event stream, I think is what it is. If you're watching live, please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and you will know every single time we go live. I'll take a round of applause. I appreciate it. All right, thanks. All right, thanks, guys. All right, so follow us on Meetup. We have a Meetup page that lets you know when we do these events. I'm going to do Bitcoin 101 again because I think Bitcoin 101 is important, but we are going to cycle in other things for these lunch and learn events so we can talk about in the future, things like wallet management or learn to mine or what is triple entry accounting, and we can make these 30 minutes long or whatever. If you watched the previous iteration of this, it was 90 minutes long. I'm going to try like hell to make this one 60 minutes. So everybody, I'm going to focus on the stuff. Ta-da! All right. So thank you to Bitcoin Association for making all of this possible. They have sponsored the space and the presentation. So thank you, everybody over at Bitcoin Association. If you'd like to download the hand cash wallet, everybody in-house, you have a slip on your table, and you can scan it, and you will download the wallet. Set yourself up a handle. We are going to be giving you free BSV at the end. So who am I? I am CoinGeek's chief Bitcoin historian. Chief because I am not one of the lesser historians at CoinGeek, and I'm a Bitcoin historian, not a money historian, and I don't know, whatever. I'm also the founder of this place, or one of the founders of this place anyways, the South Florida Citadel. I'm the CEO of Gorilla Pool, which is a BSV-focused mining pool, and been in Bitcoin since 2012, mining since 2013. You have seen me on Fox Business, NBC, and more if you're one of my stalkers. So thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And let's see. So let's talk about Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? By the end of this presentation, you'll know a bit about its history, vocabulary, basic function, and some stuff that Bitcoin is capable of doing. So please take notes. This presentation is also available in replay on our YouTube channel. So let's talk a little bit about history. We are looking at clay tablets. What the heck does this have to do with Bitcoin? Well, money is a really interesting thing. The first banks, the first money actually is lost to history. We do not know really how money started. We've been given some indications of some things, but the earliest history that we have shows complex credit systems. These clay tablets are actually a call on a debt note if I recall, for repayment of silver for a cattle order. So that's a curious one. But the systems were complex. They were not simplified. It wasn't seashells, that kind of thing. So it's really, really good stuff. Got more folk coming in as we speak. Come on in, have a seat. We're just starting up. So right here we are looking at clay tablets. This is Sumerian cuneiform. Basically, what it's saying is you owe me silver because you stole my cattle or killed my cattle or something like that. So we are not given a money evolving. We're literally given a complex credit system out of ancient Babylon as the beginning of money. Yeah. There's lots of so the Romans used salt. They paid soldiers in salt, which is where we get the word salary. But it is that was preceded by other more complex systems, and Rome also had more complex systems of credit and debt and cash as well. So from here, just so you know, we're streaming live, so we can keep questions toward the end. No big deal. You're good. So welcome. I'm glad you came. Oh, this is the Isle of Yap. This is a Yap stone, or they call this a ray stone or a rye stone, depending on where you're from. What this is a piece of collateral from which you would issue like paper money. So like in the US, paper money used to be backed by gold. On the island of Yap, their currency was backed by these giant rocks. And that's what they saw as valuable because they were big and they were carved and cool stuff. So that's another piece of money history. They go back into prehistory. We actually don't even know how old they are. but the people on Yap still actually keep these. They are passed from family to family, just like you might pass your gold treasure or an inheritance. Moving into Rome, we still don't know a lot of where the money systems in Rome came from, but they were the first people to not use the value of the money based on weight. So a piece of gold is worth a certain amount based on its weight, and that's something we're very familiar with. Rome was the first that we know of that played with the idea of just stamp it on copper and put Caesar's face on it. We will tell you what it's worth. So this is worth $1, regardless of the fluctuation of the asset that it's printed on. And so that is where we get the fiat currency. Basically means currency by authority. So Caesar's face is on it, meaning Caesar guarantees that it's worth 1 unit. And so that was an interesting step in the history of money right there. As Rome collapsed, there was a huge power vacuum across Europe. Also, this presentation doesn't touch on China, which also had currency history, which is quite different and almost entirely independent. But the first banks to grow up out of the collapse of Rome was Medici Bank. So all the way on the left, you have the head of the Medici family. Heading into the middle, you have a court gentleman who was, whose name escapes me at the moment, who was managing coin for the crown. And then you have a man named Meyer Rothschild there on the right. This is a succession from the concept of a bank. This like, hey, give me money, we'll issue credit. Maybe we'll give you loans. Here's a certain amount of interest and whatever else. And then making its way to Rothschild. What Rothschild figured out is that it was actually a lot more profitable not to lend to people directly, but lend to the governments, and the governments can have a guarantee to pay us back, and they can lend the currency out to the people at a small interest rate, which is actually the system that we have today in the West. So the US dollar is a debt note. You read the top, it says Federal Reserve note. If you know anything about holding a note on a debt, it means you owe that back plus interest typically. So Rothschild came up with that concept, created the concept of central banking over the course of about a generation, and made himself very, very wealthy. Also made Europe quite wealthy and powerful by allowing the easy access to capital and essentially creating the concepts that undergirded industrial capitalism that led us into today. The Rothschilds are a late 1700s family. They still exist today, actually. So Rothschild has offices in New York and London and around Europe, and still do financial management, investment banking, etc. The Bank of Amsterdam, 1609. This was the first commercial bank to become a central bank in the Netherlands. So a lot of the concepts that were created early on, they figured out how to turn them into a valuable tool in central banking, starting in Amsterdam. Bank of England, the reason we bring this one up is it was the earliest bank that was established as a commercial entity that became a central bank that still exists as a central bank. So the Bank of England is the central bank in England that issue the currency, but it's the same kind of thing. It is the families that basically set up the system are on the boards of directors at these central banks. Hello, welcome. Please have a seat. We're live streaming. And yeah, so Bank of England today is a institution that was started in 1694, converted into a central bank in 1809, and frankly, financed the wars between England and France, and watched the collapse of the London Stock Exchange after the Battle of Waterloo, and saw takeovers by investment bankers. A lot of this led to a lot of the distrust from a mostly Christian Europe about like, hey, who are these people that are controlling our systems? And led to a lot of, because the Rothschild family is a Jewish family, it led to a lot of the conspiracies about shadowy Jewish bankers in control of things, and led to a bunch of wars and stuff over all of that too. So there's a lot of history entangled in mistrust, distrust, royalty, religion, power, money, all of it. And it became one of these things where, holy cow, money went from, hey, can I just buy this thing? And here's a unit of account for where I can buy this thing. And people started to realize that financial manipulation and control of finance allowed people to choose winners and losers economically, militarily, etc. This really became the growth of the modern world in the way that money as a tool could be weaponized because you didn't understand it. It became so complex that the common person wasn't sure what was happening behind closed doors at the banks. Oop, I went the wrong way. So there's the Rothschild central banking crest. So let's talk about the Austrian backlash. Because of this perception that all war and all power was a product of inflation and the ability to issue money to insiders first, and then the devaluation of the currency just became the problem of the common man that was paid in it later, led to a political backlash about the resurgence of sound money. This primarily was a product of a man named Ludwig von Mises. So we're talking late 1800s era Viennese gentleman discussing, first of all, the velocity of money, the power of entrepreneurship, but secondarily, it was this notion of sound money. And hey, gold-backed currency was also a really good thing. It was really useful in other ways. So maybe it should be a both and. Maybe you should be able to use gold as money and fiat currency as money. Maybe they have value. Maybe they can be hybrid in some way. But he was a pragmatic, I say Republican with the lowercase r. He believed in some basic concept of the state. A lot of people call him a what do you call it? An anarcho-capitalist. It just isn't true. He was a big fan actually of basic systems of the state, but he really hated corruption and abuse. And he saw the money as a cornerstone of the way that it was being abused by a technocratic means. It was people were confused about the systems, but if things could just be simplified and make it that people could understand what was going on, we'd all be better for it. And Ludwig von Mises has a killer following even now. Welcome. Good. Please have a seat. We're streaming. And then in contrast, we have John Maynard Keynes. So Keynes is he's an interesting character in economic history because he took the opposite case. He looked at it and said, no. First of all, he's British. He saw the power of money as a way to really cement the power of Western culture in a very British sense. So his contention is that the British way is crucial, and it's his job to make England a safer place for democracy and everything else. He's very much of the Anglosphere and really saw the value of that in stark contrast, but in such a way that the purpose of it was to make not just the state or the crown, but the state, the crown, and the people of England great by management of the British pound at the time. Funny because during his era, the U.S. dollar replaced the British pound or the British pound for supremacy globally during that era. But the way that the U.S. did it were based on lessons that came from Keynes initially. So I just keep going backwards on me. All right. Also of that same era, this is a gentleman named Alan Turing. So now I'm switching from money to technology. If you know anything about World War II, the Nazis used a machine called the Enigma machine. This was every single day. They had a typewriter that had 2 ciphers that you could click. So you basically create a key, and that key would be distributed among very high-level officers and would allow them to change their cryptography every day and communicate in code using Morse code, and officers could read it, but nobody could figure out the cipher. In fact, the Western powers, the Allies, weren't even sure exactly what they were doing. They didn't know what the system was until they were able to kidnap one of these Enigma machines. When they kidnapped they stole an Enigma machine from the Nazis, they handed it over to Alan Turing, who was a computer scientist, which, in 1940s, computer scientist, right? And said, hey, can we figure out what cipher they're using? And it was super complicated. But you see this machine here. This is called the Bomba machine. It's essentially a Bitcoin miner. In all basic sense, what it's doing, it is checking brute force cryptography. It's basically taking a known data set. In this case, it's the German language. They were presuming it was the German language. Could have been any other thing, and then this would have never worked. But they presumed the German language. They took a number of years in trying to brute hash, just guess and check. Is it this combination? Is it this combination? Is it this combination? Years of failure. They almost gave up until they realized that the Nazis are so systematic that at the end of every single broadcast that you ever see, either encrypted or decrypted, well, they saw the decrypted ones, they finish everything with the words Heil Hitler. And wouldn't you know it, if they do it on the encrypted side too, then you know that the last two words in every encrypted transmission are going to be Heil Hitler. So that gave them a little piece of information to guess as part of the formula in their guess and check. They know what letters those letters are, maybe. When they tested it, it took them about 7 minutes using this computer, the first real computer, to crack that code every single day. So in the morning, when the cipher would change, they'd say, okay, now we got to crack it again. Let's work until we can break the code. And they would crack the code in roughly 7 minutes every morning until the end of the war. And so this was the first computer. It was the first general computation. It's really mostly a mechanical thing, but it taught us a lot about the computation of ones and zeros, basically. It led to Great Britain being the center of computing really up until the 1980s. It really only switched over to the United States in a maximalist sense through the 80s and 90s. But until then, British computing really was where it was at, and it really started with Alan Turing. Today, this concept of Turing completeness really just means the ability to compute a thing. So that's named after this gentleman, Alan Turing. So we talked a little bit about history of money, politics, and computing. Well, wouldn't you know it, they started to coalesce together in the late 60s up until the 90s. So this is crypto culture and the early internet. So you have David Chaum here, Ralph Merkle, Martin Hellman, and Whitfield Diffie. Four mostly gray-haired guys. I guess Martin Hellman's not so gray-haired in this picture, but these were guys that sort of came out of the hippie movement in the late 60s, talking about digital freedom and the ability to communicate over encrypted channels with other people, and the way to maybe start to hack systems to be tools of liberation, even if they were invented for pillars of control. David Chaum created the first digital currency, probably the first digital currency that we know of. Ralph Merkle created what's called Merkle trees or Merkle proofs, which is basically a structural concept for where to put encrypted hashes in a system so that they can be repurposed in a very logical manner going forward. And then Martin Hellman and Whitfield Diffie basically created what we know today as public key cryptography key pairs, which led to things like PGP was the first iteration, but then ultimately the Diffie-Hellman key pair system is a fundamental aspect of Bitcoin itself, as well as most internet communication today. So the ability to encrypt and decrypt information such that, you know, not everybody in the universe can just like intercept your text messages and read them, for example. So with them, they were deeply political. They, in the 90s or the late 80s more so, they started to form into a group that is called the cypherpunks, which was, again, this sort of increasing kind of a left-wing attitude about the power of systems versus the power of people, using cryptography, using math, using computers. They wanted compute internet to be revolutionary. So you got Gilmore, Tim May wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. Hal Finney created the first use of a proof of work system, which is a way to basically mitigate email spam, which we still haven't really figured out. Something like 80% of all emails sent today are still spam, and we let Google or Microsoft filter them for us, but we could be doing it on our side using proof of work. Or wouldn't you know it, we could bootstrap it over Bitcoin today if we just had the willpower to do so. Then we have a gentleman named Milton Friedman. He's a Mises fellow. I mentioned Ludwig von Mises before. Friedman predicted in 1999 that the one thing that's missing that will soon be developed is a reliable e-cash system, talking about the necessity for the internet to have a money, because we can do all kinds of communication over channels, but it's really difficult to pay each other over channels. At least it was in 1999. He predicted that something like Bitcoin would be created, and he was only about 9 years early on that prediction. So let's talk about the cryptography mailing list. A lot of these professional cryptographers came together, and they would talk Scratch in the way that experts can, and just talk about cryptography all the time. It's some of the nerdiest forums in the history of the internet, but you can still check them out at the Mets Dowd list. This is where everyone who was anyone would hang out and talk about cryptography. And this is where the Bitcoin white paper was announced in 2008 on Halloween. It says, I've been working on a new electronic cash system that's fully peer-to-peer with no trusted third party. Double spending is prevented with a peer-to-peer network, no mint or other trusted parties. Participants can be anonymous. New coins are made from a hash cash style proof of work, and proof of work for a new coin generation also powers the network to prevent double spending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He also attached the Bitcoin white paper here and explains, he doesn't go into detail about the history of money, but this was an implied thing in this group. This was a group that often talked about cryptography for freedom and using cryptography to create money so that we had a free money, a money of the people kind of thing. So the concept was novel. It was not the first. There were actually many attempts to create digital currencies before Bitcoin. And this one was just novel in that it was not super cryptographic, actually. Went backwards again. I don't know what's going on with this. So people didn't like that Satoshi Nakamoto was an unknown entity. Like, hey, who are you? Are you Tim May? Are you Hal Finney? Are you David Chum? Are you? Nope, not going there. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. But the interesting thing is that people would say, well, maybe it's the NSA, maybe it's the CIA. Well, he kind of made it that it didn't matter. He released the software in such a way that it was completely free and open source. Anybody could audit the code. Anybody could participate if you had the cojones to compete. And ultimately didn't use cryptography for anything except for generating key pairs, which is really just using it for a mailbox is what he was doing. And that ticked a lot of people off concerning the security of the network. Like, why don't you just use an exponential curve to make it that you cannot double spend the system? Well, he didn't like that. He liked economic game theory. He liked it to be human interaction. So Satoshi Nakamoto had a very human view on solving the problems of digital cash, which in my opinion is the reason why that it has been so successful compared to all the others who, even today, we see this with the creation of things like Zcash and like, hey, why don't we just use a ZK rollup and do this stuff and we can encrypt it and decrypt and do all these other things, solve all these other problems. Like, yeah, a computer in theory can solve anything, but you're acting like the operator of the computer can be somehow taken away from it. But ultimately, these things are human interaction, and human interactions, especially in economics, are crucial. We're doing business with people. So the main thing he talked about was the double spend problem. Why do we need to stop the double spend problem? So if you accidentally swipe your Visa at TGI Fridays and they charge you twice, all you got to do is call Fridays or call your credit card company and say, hey, somebody made a mistake, and somebody will fix it. But that's because they control the ledger. In Bitcoin, nobody controls the ledger. Well, not entirely. There's game theory that controls the ledger. In theory, you could take over the system if you could control all these variables at once, or if you could influence all these variables at once. But ultimately, the double spend problem is also kind of like passing a bad check. Like if I go write a check at grocery store 1 and on the same day write a check at grocery store 2 and neither of them try to make that deposit on the same day, maybe I can leave with twice as many groceries as I'm supposed to. Bitcoin solves this with work, the same way that Hal Finney thought to solve email spam. Later, people like Adam Back and some other people tried to solve email spam with similar systems. But the double spend problem is solved with proof of work. So what is Bitcoin? This is what the Bitcoin white paper looks like. It is 9 pages long in total. It's more like 7 pages long if you take out the math. And it's really, really readable. If you haven't read the Bitcoin white paper, I challenge you to. And if you just feel like it's too long, I think you're being lazy about it. It should take you 10 minutes to give it one read through. By all means, take time, go back, take notes, use your highlighter, look up the words. But Satoshi Nakamoto wasn't a big cryptography guy. He didn't use a lot of big words. He wasn't trying to navel gaze or talk over your head or make you feel inferior. He was giving you a basic thesis about how to bootstrap digital money in a very simple way. It's super approachable, which ticks off the nerds. The nerds immediately didn't really like Satoshi Nakamoto because they were very much revolutionaries and Satoshi kind of wasn't. So what's he trying to solve for? Is he trying to burn down the central banks? Change everything about the world? No. Commerce on the internet. That's the opening line. Bitcoin white paper. What's he trying to solve? Commerce on the internet. Business. In 2008, your options for making an internet purchase were credit cards and PayPal. Basic. I mean, that was 90+% of the way that you would do business on the internet. Now, today we have Zelle and Venmo, and we've got, depending on what country you're in, if you're in China, you got your WeChat pay apps. You've got all kinds of ways that you can make these payments. But in 2008, commerce on the internet was PayPal and credit cards. And Satoshi Nakamoto wanted it to be Bitcoin. Why? Well, he talks about the cost of mediation, increasing transaction costs, limiting minimum practical transaction size, and cutting off the possibility for small casual transactions. He was very interested in little commerce. This is people buying coffee. This is people maybe paying to read a single article in the New York Times, or other simple uses of the technology. Also, if you're watching the stream, feel free to ask questions. I see the questions that are popping up here. I will be happy to answer them at the end. And if you're watching live, if you're one of the lucky folk to be here live, I will also be happy to take your questions at the end of the presentation. I'm rushing because I'm trying to finish this in an hour. I was told before that this presentation is a little too long for a lot of people. So what is a hash function? Well, like, what is Bitcoin doing? I'm going to go over some of the basics. What is a hash function? You can take data of any size, put it into this little meat grinder that I put on my presentation. It does a very specific piece of math to it, and then it spits out a hash on the other side. Now, that hash can be reversed if you know the logic of that hash function. And so you can take something as simple as writing your name digitally. So I would put Kurt Wookert Jr. on a Word document, run it through a hash function, it'll give me a hash. It is a predictable string. I know how to decrypt it or encrypt it or whatever, but it makes it a very simple, predictable string of numbers that I can use in many ways. I can also take the entire digital copy of the Library of Congress and do the exact same thing to it, and it will spit out a short string hash that allows me to prove that Kurt Wookert's name was on this document and the Library of Congress exists connected to this document. And so it allows you to take data of any size or any complexity and reduce it to something very, very simple, systematic, predictable, and something that can be put into a Merkle tree. So it can be reassessed and that its provenance can be reattested to. You can prove that it existed in a certain state at a certain time forever. What is the Bitcoin network? So it's really just a network of computers that are interconnected to each other that are sharing those hashes. Those hashes are typically Bitcoins. They're typically payment data, essentially, but it can be all kinds of other things. What we've seen over the last couple of months is a lot of people like putting JPEGs on Bitcoin and calling them ordinal inscriptions, and people are having a lot of fun with that. Could be anything. Could be the Library of Congress sent over Bitcoin. You can do that. But ultimately, what it's doing is validating that the rules are being followed, like all of the rule set of Bitcoin. It's a global attestation that every time a block is built, that the rules are followed, nothing's been broken, you can trust this money. The Medicis or the Rothschilds or anybody else, they're not inflating the supply. You're not being undercut by anybody. And you can prove it because cryptography and hash functions. You can just go check. Pretty cool. So what is a blockchain? It's a database. It's very simple. You have databases on your hard drive on your computer and on your phone and probably up in the cloud that's hosting your blogs or your family photos or whatever else you do. If you use a Google account or you use Facebook or Twitter or any of these other things, your information is in a database. The blockchain is just a database that does one interesting thing. It is distributed, so multiple people have copies of the same database. They are updated forward only, and they are competitively written. So you may fail to write if somebody else writes to it faster, better, etc. But it is a forward-only database, and this is really, really crucial that it is forward-only and competitive. Makes it that you can trust what's on the system because nobody can reverse it, and if somebody attempts to reverse it, everybody can see that that just happened, and that ultimately the people that are writing to it are people whose names you know, or they have a business license, and they're committing a certain amount of proof of work, which is an opportunity cost to say that, hey, you can probably trust this person that's spending millions of dollars to write to the blockchain. What is a wallet? A lot of people think your coins are in your wallet or on your wallet on your phone. They are not. Your coins are on the blockchain. They're on that database. What your wallet is doing, it is managing your private key. So when you generate a wallet, it creates a private key that creates a whole bunch of public keys that you can send Bitcoins to. All it's doing is managing that. It is a key. It's much better to think of it as a key than to think of it as a wallet. It allows you to unlock what you own on the blockchain, on that database. Very simple. Cold versus hot. What is a cold wallet versus a hot wallet? Well, hot wallet is something, the hand cash wallet here, if you'd like to scan it, you can scan it while it's up on screen. You can download the hand cash wallet and get yourself some BSV Bitcoins that I can send you at the end of the presentation. But a hot wallet should be the money that you would keep in your pocket. I might keep 20 bucks or 50 bucks in my pocket because maybe I want to buy a tank of gas or a bag of Skittles, or if it's Taco Tuesday, like I'm going to go spend some cash on stuff like that. It's money that I intend to spend that I'm willing to lose if necessary for work. Cold wallet is something that is generated offline, high security. You should think of it more like the gold bars that you might bury in your backyard. This is your savings. This is your, the world might collapse and I'm going to need to access a lot of money. Maybe I'm going to need to buy a house or a car or weapons or something. Like this is your stored away forever money. Like maybe you want to give your cold wallet to your children someday in your will. So very different concepts. Hot wallet on your phone, ready to go. The coins are touching the internet. Might get hacked. You might lose them. Cold storage, this is done in a sterile environment on a new computer that is not touching the internet, and you're doing the cypherpunk thing as much as possible, which is something I can teach you how to do if you're interested. What is proof of work? We talked a little bit about proof of work. I keep saying that it mitigates spam or it does whatever else. Proof of work is an ethereal concept. In a very basic sense, it is brute forcing a data set. That's what's happening digitally. But what are we actually doing? Why would you come hear me speak today? Why am I valuable to listen to? Well, I have a certain amount of provenance. I have put a certain amount of proof of work into my reputation to build a business, build a reputation, be on TV, not be a scammer for certain amount of time, invest my own time and money into things that makes me say, you know what, I'm a little more willing to trust Kurt about a subject than I am willing to trust someone who maybe just discovered this, or somebody who, just might seem like a good salesman, but you don't know who he is or where he comes from or how much money is put into these things. A more practical example, because it's using my reputation a little bit, proof of work actually allows you to circumvent that a little bit. Imagine if you wouldn't open your door for somebody unless they knocked exactly 50,000 times on your door, because you just don't want to be bothered. Your time is valuable. You're doing other things. But if you really, really want my attention, you will knock on my door 50,000 times. If you do it exactly 50,000 times, I will open the door, we will talk. It must be important, right? Because we've wasted that opportunity cost. So you've burned this energy for me to trust you for X amount of time. That's transplanted into Bitcoin. Who gets to write to the Bitcoin ledger? Only somebody who is willing to do the proverbial 50,000 knocks on the door. You start to say, you know what? I'm going to let that guy write to it. I'm willing to believe that if he's willing to waste this time and energy and all these other things, that they must be doing it right. And this is part of the game theory that makes Bitcoin secure. Not using cryptography, using jumping jacks or whatever, right? You can't fake it. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin in that regard. What is a mining pool? Well, I might not be able to knock on a door 50,000 times. I might have to bring 10 friends and ask them to each knock 5,000 times because that's easier, right? Or 100 friends and do it 500 times, or 1,000 friends and do it 50 times, or whatever, right? Now, if I brought if I had 1,000 friends, I don't know that I would necessarily be knocking on your door, but you get the point. We get to do this as a collective. So what a mining pool does, it says, okay, I have a Bitcoin node. I do have some ability to produce proof of work. But the proof of work number has gotten so difficult that we need to do this collectively. We need to collectivize. So it allows you to buy one ASIC hashing machine in order to brute force this hash list, and we do it together. And if you're 1% of the pool, you get 1% of the pool's payouts. And so it's just a system that allows you to participate in the accounting of the ledger, the hashing of the hash table with other people as a way to make it more accessible to people that may not have $50 million to invest in building just a mining operation by themselves. You see we have these hashing units up here. These are obsolete. They're worth maybe $200 a piece. They're completely obsolete, actually. They will never make as much money as they would spend on electricity. But if we were to buy a more modern version of that and participate in a mining pool, you can get payouts all the time. Little bits, because you would be a small percentage of the network, but you're participating in securing the system, and you get paid for that because that's how Bitcoin works. All right. So what is Bitcoin actually doing? What is the function? What's happening when you use Bitcoin? So let's say you send me a transaction. You can do two things. You can broadcast it directly to my phone, my hot wallet, and I can broadcast it to the network, or you can broadcast it to the network and ask the network to find my public key address. This is the two ways to do it. So one is a broadcast method and the other is a peer-to-peer transaction. But either way, somebody needs to send that transaction to the Bitcoin network. So when you broadcast it, it's actually geographically based. So if I broadcast it to the internet, it is going to hit whatever node is connected to my wallet. So Bitcoin node, wallet to Bitcoin node. Meanwhile, all of these ASICs are looking for the hash. Whoever finds the hash does the proof of work. Whoever gets the 50,000 knocks first, then builds the block that has my transaction in it, or your transaction, or whatever. It takes that transaction, adds it to a block. It is paid both a subsidy. This is how Bitcoins are mined. New Bitcoins are circulated into the economy. And it is how transactions are validated and processed and written to the blockchain. Does it make sense? I know thank you. It's a little bit ethereal. We can do demos for the in-person folk as well. So what is Bitcoin for? In a very basic sense, it's for simple payments. Simple payments are a real easy thing. Send me $5. Rather than sending me PayPal or Venmo or something else, like you can just send me Bitcoins. That's cool. That works really well for me. A lot of people do this globally. I know it's not the most popular thing in the universe because people want Bitcoin to be an investment asset in a lot of ways, but it's a cash system. The title of the white paper is an electronic cash system. It should be used for such things. Also tokenized assets. So you have a global ledger that nobody can screw with and anybody can audit. Well, that allows you to tokenize all kinds of things. So you can write your home or your car or a valuable piece of art, or you can break them up. Maybe you want to sell 1/100th of your home because you need a little extra cash. Maybe you're going to sell 100th of your home because you want to put a new roof on the house. And when you sell the house, the person that's holding that token of 100th of your house can redeem that token for a profit. It allows you to securitize anything in a very, very simple manner. This is the use of a token. This is something in theory you could do on paper, but you can lose the paper, your lawyer can die or whatever. In Bitcoin, you can put all the rules and all the logic. You can automate all of it, and it's there forever. It will not be burned or stolen or lost in a flood or have somebody say, oh, shoot, I lost my copy. It's there. You've created a tokenized smart contract. You can do the same thing with your car. Maybe your car becomes an NFT and it gets updated every time you get an oil change. And if you do your oil changes right on time every single time, when you go to sell your car is more valuable than the guy that didn't do his oil changes on time. But you would never know that because the data about that thing isn't readily available. But it could be if it was all on a global data ledger. So these are some really interesting novel use cases of the blockchain. I also put a pair of gym shoes or sneakers. I don't know what they say in Florida. I'm from Chicago, so they were gym shoes, but I think, is this a sneaker town? Little bit, yeah. I get the East Coast sneakers, and but imagine having a valuable piece of I don't know, are Yeezys still cool? I think Kanye is a bad guy now, so I think Yeezys may have lost a little bit of value, but you can still attest to their value on chain and say, hey, these were manufactured at this plant. They're an officially licensed Adidas Yeezy shoe. And here's the token. Here's its provenance across its manufacturer, sale, distribution, etc. You can even securitize it, sell derivatives against your Yeezy shoes. I know, it's goofy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a company called Unisat. They have a product called Seafood Chain. I don't know if you've ever had Norwegian salmon or Norwegian water even. It's the best tap water I've ever had in my life. But Norwegian salmon is the most valuable salmon in the world because the water is really, really cold and really, really clean. So it's worth more, right? How do you know that the salmon you're eating at your favorite sushi restaurant or that you picked up at Publix or whatever is really good Norwegian salmon versus really junky Pacific farmed salmon that lived on recirculated poop 3 miles away from a waste treatment plant? Do you know? Can you know? Who do you ask? Do you ask the butcher? How much does the butcher know? The butcher knows what truck it came off of if you're lucky, but where was it before that? We don't know any of this stuff. What Unisat has done is they created this product that immediately when the fish is caught, it is geotagged. The fish is given a digital twin token. And every time that fish hits another checkpoint or does some other thing, a transaction is pushed to the blockchain where nobody can tamper with it. Nobody can lie. They can say, this was the temperature of the fish, and this was its next geolocation, and here's the guy who handled it. And now all of a sudden, you can literally prove that the salmon you're eating came from a very, very specific spot and was handled by the best guy or the worst guy on the boat. And maybe there's a difference in what you should be paying for the fish you're eating based on which guy handled it on the boat. And that's a big data problem that can't be solved in any other way, but Bitcoin lets you solve that. And Unisat actually created the system for it. This is a live product. This exists. So they're a Norwegian company, wouldn't you know it? And they figured out how to make value out of that. Let's talk a little bit about Certahash. This is also a company that exists. Every time there is a cybersecurity breach, the typical time that it takes for you to know that your data has been stolen is not days, not weeks, not months. It is often years. You usually only find out that your company's data has been stolen when it shows up on the dark web. Why is that? Well, the reason is the exfiltration process, the act of stealing it, is a digital act. It can be done from anywhere. And all the hacker has to do is erase the logs that say that the data left the network environment. This is what happens all the time. And it's not just from little places. This has happened at Experian, which is the credit reporting agency. This has happened at the biggest companies in the world. This has actually happened to the US military. This has happened at places like NASA, where data breaches just happen and they don't even know until the stuff shows up on the dark web. Well, what Certahash does is instead of using the log or trusting the network log on the system, is it pushes a transaction to Bitcoin every single time any network event occurs. Somebody logs in, somebody opens a new network endpoint, somebody commissions a laptop, somebody gets a new company phone, somebody turns a company phone in, somebody accesses the inner server, somebody accesses your outer edge of your network in any regard, somebody connected to the internet. Carl logs into his computer at 6:01 every morning or 6:03 or 5:59. These are network events. And if every single one of those network events is pushed to Bitcoin as it happens, the second somebody tries to reverse the log, that's a new network event. And it causes an alarm. It says, hey, someone just tried to go backwards. And the only reason someone would try to go backwards is if they're trying to steal your data and cover their tracks. So instead of waiting 250 days to say, oh, shoot, my stuff's for sale on Alphabay, guys, sorry, all your social security numbers have been screwed. We got to pay for 3 years of credit monitoring, and it's $100 million loss for the company. It happens instantly, in 2 minutes. Holy crap, somebody just reversed our logs, lock everything, call the police, get our cybersecurity outsourcing firm in. We're having an event right now. Again, only possible because of Bitcoin. This is also a live product, by the way. This is not theory. Certahash is an operating business. So what about disagreements? We talked about all these things. Bitcoin does this. It all sounds great. We all live in utopia, right? Well, no, there's 20 blockchains. Most of them do the exact same thing. They do it poorly. They're poorly differentiated from each other. Even among Bitcoiners, we disagree about which blockchain's the real Bitcoin, which one actually does X. Some of the stuff that I explained to you can be done on BTC, some can only be done on BSV, some can be done on BTC and BSV in certain scales and whatever else. Well, if you're competing, if we disagree on an event, so if we disagree on what is Bitcoin, how should Bitcoin function, what should this look like at scale, how should we scale, they split. Whoever breaks the rules is the splitter. Well, then we've got all these other things. There's race conditions. There's you orphan the one that is the invalid version of Bitcoin. But ultimately in 2017, it was decided that, you know what, this block size limit that was added to Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto early in the game really should be gotten away from, because it makes it that you can't do micropayments and some of these really cool things. Think about how many network events happen for CertaHash. Could CertaHash be paying $6 every time there's a network event? Well, no, obviously not. It makes their business model impossible. So on BSV, you can do it for 1/10,000th of a penny every time there's a network event to broadcast a transaction to the BSV blockchain, which is just an implementation of Bitcoin. But we had this major disagreement about what Bitcoin is for. In 2017, there was a split that created the big block and the small block version of Bitcoin. So you have small block BTC, that's the one that's worth whatever it is today, $26,000, or it's been going up and down quite a bit lately, volatility with the bank situation. And then you have BSV, it's worth about $35 right now, but is capable of 50 million transactions in a day, and the average fee is a 10,000th of a penny. And so there was a whole civil war fought over the whole thing. Satoshi, the creator of Bitcoin, was an advocate for big blocks. He talks about the current system where every user's a network node is not the intended configuration at scale. The BTC people will tell you, you need to run your own node, you need to check your own, you need to validate your own transactions, your own data set, all these other things. Well, here's Satoshi Nakamoto saying, no, they'd be like every Usenet user running their own NNP server. The design supports letting users be users. The more burden to run a node, the fewer nodes there will be. Those nodes will be in big server farms. The rest will be client nodes that only do transactions and don't generate. Does anybody run their own email server? Everybody uses Google, basically, or Microsoft. And if you don't use one of those two, you're probably military. So, but truly, we've outsourced everything. Like the internet runs on Amazon. Amazon used to run on the internet. Now the internet runs on Amazon. It's basically this backbone of the universe that we just outsource. So why should Bitcoin be any different? Satoshi Nakamoto is saying exactly that right here. Bitcoin should be outsourced. Proof of work and Merkle trees and hash functions and all this stuff, these are all mechanisms that reduce trust because of cryptography. Well, that's great. So Satoshi Nakamoto also hated this sort of cypherpunk attitude about, hey man, Bitcoin is for getting around the law or getting around weird political censorship stuff. It is good for that, actually, but he explains here when WikiLeaks got deplatformed a number of years ago, when Julian Assange got himself into some trouble, people are like, cool, Bitcoin solves this. You can still raise money with Bitcoin. And here's him scolding everybody. No, don't bring it on. The project needs to grow gradually. I make this appeal to WikiLeaks not to try to use Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a small beta community in its infancy. You would not stand to get more than pocket change, and the heat you would bring would likely destroy us at this stage. He didn't like it. So when people tell you, oh, Bitcoin was for Silk Road and for subverting the system, here's Satoshi telling everybody, like, grow up. You're going to get us all killed. This is ridiculous. Then he disappears. So Satoshi Nakamoto says, you know what, I'm out. I'm so tired of the nonsense. There was so much political bickering about Bitcoin early on that he just quit. And he left the keys to one of the guys that he really liked, a guy named Gavin Andreessen. Gavin was around from like the first month he saw Bitcoin and said, you know what, this is super cool. How can I help? It's one of the very few people that struck up a relationship with Satoshi Nakamoto. Basically, him and Mike Hearn had a very close relationship with Satoshi, and everybody else wanted to argue with Satoshi about why Bitcoin didn't work the way he designed it and why his ideas about Bitcoin were ultimately not valuable. So despite all the people saying like, hey, man, everybody thought Bitcoin was really exciting, the opposite is true. Most people didn't like it at all. And yeah. So then he gets hacked. In 2014, so Satoshi disappeared in late 2010 through early 2011. It's not exactly clear when his last message was because we know that he got hacked at some point. We just officially that he had been hacked, subverted literally all of his email accounts, his peer-to-peer foundation account, the SourceForge Bitcoin repo, everything got taken over. So it makes it unclear when was the last time it was actually Satoshi talking to us. And this led to a whole bunch of subterfuge in the Bitcoin civil war. Like, which one's the real Bitcoin? What did Satoshi actually believe? It's a really unfortunate event, actually. And then the hacker used it to blackmail Satoshi. So pretty bogus. So Gavin Andreessen, all the way on the left, was the guy that Satoshi put in charge. Gavin, super nice guy, really soft-spined, unfortunately. Didn't want control for himself, so he handed key slices to a number of other people. Basically created a oligarchical software development board, Bitcoin Core. Basically, the people in charge of the repo kind of by de facto became in charge of Bitcoin, because who else was going to comment? Who else was in charge? Who was going to fight back, basically? So you see some of these other people that then had their say in Bitcoin. I'll check the comments here real quick. See any? No, we're doing a good job. All right, cool. So in 2014, we also had the big money show up. This is when the Silicon Valley venture capital, the old world money, we had the EU-based AXA Insurance showed up, New York Life, CME Ventures. CME is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So we're talking about big old insurance companies like MasterCard, like big old money payments, or people in the commodities trade. We're talking multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. They create an incubator called Digital Currency Group. Digital Currency Group is run by a gentleman named Barry Silbert, with folks like Glenn Hutchins from Silver Lake Capital, guys from Bain Capital, a gentleman named Lawrence Summers or Larry Summers, is a Clinton White House advisor and sat on a couple of boards at Harvard and was at the, I always forget if it was the World Bank or if it was the, I don't know, basically globalist banker types. These people we're trying to get away from, right? Like, we're trying to reissue money in a way that is fair and self-sovereign and empowering to the individual. But instead, Satoshi Nakamoto gets kicked out of his own project, hacked, blackmailed, and a bunch of old money people show up and say, hey, we're going to start paying Bitcoin developers to be professional Bitcoin developers, and you're going to do what we want because we're paying the bills. Wouldn't that be great? We're going to make it a really great investment, we promise. So here's the threat letter to Satoshi Nakamoto in 2014. Dear Satoshi, your docs, passwords, IP addresses are being sold on the darknet. That sucks. Apparently, you didn't configure Tor properly. Your IP leaked when you used your email account sometime in 2010. You are not safe. It's not something I'd like to receive from an anonymous character on the internet. You need to get out of where you are as soon as possible before these people harm you. Sounds like a veiled threat to me. Thank you for inventing Bitcoin, which at this point, I'm super, like, if I'm Satoshi Nakamoto, my adrenaline is at 100% right here. Really, really bogus situation. Here's Thamos. He was the moderator of the Bitcoin Talk forum, which at the time was the biggest forum in the Bitcoin space, basically saying, hey, guys trying to blackmail me too. What the heck is going on here? Here's Peter Todd, one of the guys who was pictured previously, saying, I got another forwarded email from Satoshi from 2011. Indicates this was a hijacked account, not expired and re-registered. So whoever this was, whoever hacked Satoshi Nakamoto, has his email all the way back to the beginning. How much information would some malicious actor know about you if they got all the way into your email and could see all your emails from forever? It's a really, really unfortunate situation, especially if you're a privacy advocate or somebody that may or may not have created a multi-billion-dollar currency that's competing with world finance, and all your enemies are getting VC backed, and now you're on the run with some guy saying, hey, get out of wherever you are. It's time to hide, buddy. Thanks for creating Bitcoin. Well, at the time, a gentleman named Dr. Craig Wright, an Australian computer scientist, got multiple PhDs in things like theology and math and game theory and cryptography and all kinds of things, leaves his house in the middle of the night forever. Maybe, kinda. There's mixed information about exactly how this all went down, which is funny because he was a consultant to Australian intelligence, UK intelligence, United States intelligence. He was an applied, basically a pen tester or a software consultant on security. He was doing forensic accounting for various law enforcement agencies to try to bring down human traffickers, money launderers, drug smugglers, and these types. And he was also doing work for a company called Lassiter's Casino, which was the largest casino in the Eastern Hemisphere. He was also putting up networks for companies like Vodafone and building out accounting systems for the Sydney Stock Exchange. So this is a numbers guy, a math guy, a computer guy, a game theory guy, who all of a sudden, when Satoshi Nakamoto's email gets doxed and everything gets destroyed and all these threats start happening, this gentleman takes his family out of the family home, leaves forever, takes him to London, disappears for a little while. Well, he gets outed by Wired and Gizmodo magazines on the same day as Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin. On the same day, the Australian tax office raided his home and stole all of his files, a couple of supercomputers and some other stuff. Depends whose version of the story you believe. The ATO will say, we figured out this guy's a tax cheat. Well, the tax cheat was the fact that he filed Bitcoin-related research and development costs on his Australian taxes on his 2009 tax year, which was the year that Bitcoin was created, and making it the first person to write the words Bitcoin on a tax return anywhere in the universe. Wouldn't you know it, he's a really honest guy who worked for law enforcement, didn't really like the cypherpunks, didn't like the WikiLeaks people, and had all the skill set necessary to build such a thing as Bitcoin. You should know right now, this is the most contentious part of my presentation. Bitcoiners, as a rule, really, really, really hate this guy. So they will tell you he's a liar and a fraud. He can't code. He didn't do any of this stuff. It's all made up. The man isn't Satoshi. Okay. Proof of work would lead me to believe otherwise. The man has not left Bitcoin. He hasn't allowed himself to be bullied out of the community. Instead, he has worked tirelessly at a company called N-Chain, a gigantic research and development firm in London. He's got about 300 employees over there that are doing Bitcoin-related research and development, spending his own money to the tune of millions of dollars a year to try to prove all of these things that Bitcoin is capable of, despite the fact that everybody hates him. Sounds like proof of work to me. Sounds like the 50,000 knocks on a door, even though it seems really unreasonable. So there was a backlash to all this stuff. The scaling war got really nasty. What is Bitcoin for? Is it a store of value and an investment asset like the venture capital people would lead you to believe? Or is it the most disruptive payments network in the history of the world? Is it the thing that could put MasterCard and Visa and SWIFT and Wire and ACH and all the commercial banks and everybody out of business because we do not need them? Well, what are the people that control all these systems going to want you to believe? They're going to want you to believe, hey, buy Bitcoin, go away, get rich, everything's fine, right? Please don't disrupt our massive multi-trillion-dollar global business model. That would really suck. Along that way, if you look all the way at the left, you got a guy, Mike Hearn, tried to create Bitcoin XT. Mike Hearn was an ally of Satoshi. He tried to build the first big block version of Bitcoin and expand the Bitcoin network to be a great payments network to the world. He was threatened. He was DDoSed. DDoS attackers, they took down his IP address by sending lots of spam to his local ISP, meaning his whole region was taken off the internet as a threat. Don't you tell us what to do with Bitcoin? So the fact that he had an opinion that was in contrary to the MasterCard side, all of a sudden got him pushed out. He left the Bitcoin community in 2015, if I recall, and basically said, this is dead. The entire culture is toxic. You're never going to figure out anything. Bitcoin is incredible, but I quit because it's just terrible people. Really sucked. Gavin Andresen had a similar thing. He left. He was kicked out of the community, actually, because he saw Craig Wright do a key signing pair that allegedly proved he was Satoshi Nakamoto. He went and flew out to London and said, I'm going to talk to this guy. Let's see what the story is. Well, he decided this is Satoshi, not because of what he saw cryptographically with Satoshi Nakamoto's keys, but he said, I talked to him about things that only Satoshi Nakamoto would know. And then I shook his hand and said, thank you for creating Bitcoin. Well, Gavin Andresen got kicked out of the Bitcoin project the day he published what happened. Like, that's you've been compromised. Okay, well, who has the right to kick out the man that Satoshi Nakamoto put in control of the project? Got a guy named Amaury Sachet tried to create Bitcoin ABC, which is an implementation of Bitcoin. ABC stands for Adaptable Block Size Cap. That ended up forking and being the reference client for Bitcoin Cash, which some of you may have heard of. Bitcoin Cash split away from the Bitcoin Core Network in 2017 in an attempt to get hash power to switch to the version of Bitcoin that scaled and maintained all the fundamentals of Bitcoin. But the BTC, Bitcoin Core people, succeeded in social engineering people into thinking that, hey, this massive change called segregated witness is the real Bitcoin. Witness is, hey, we're going to add a whole separate Merkle tree that's going to remove signatures out of the blocks, the block headers of Bitcoin, so the things that we see on the blockchain. We're going to replace those signatures with hashes. We're going to put them in a different spot. And instead of having signatures, which is key to what is cryptography, if not signature validation of what is real, and we're replacing it with hashes that say, trust me, I'm witness data. I witnessed the signature. So we're just adding an extra layer of trust into the system, ton of complexity, and with that, lowering its ability to do some of the other cool stuff. The salmon example, the cybersecurity example, or even simple payments, they threw all that out of Bitcoin BTC and then called us the bad guys because we wanted to keep it. And now you got Craig Wright over here all the way on the right. He's the Australian man I was talking about. I believe he is Satoshi Nakamoto, is the main guy behind Bitcoin BSV or Bitcoin SV. So we have three competing Bitcoin chains. We've got big block, medium block, and small block. Block is just bandwidth. Block size is the reconciliation period. Every 10 minutes, the entire network is accounted for. That state of the network is written into a block forever. On BTC, that is 1 megabyte. In practical terms, that means 5 to 7 transactions per second globally. That's the total bandwidth of the network. On Bitcoin Cash, BCH, it's a little bit bigger. It's 32 megabyte. It's good for maybe 150 transactions a second globally. It's not great. Visa, for example, do about 6,000 transactions a second globally. On Black Friday, they do about 60,000 transactions a second. So we're many orders of magnitude away from being able to do that on BTC or BCH. BSV does not have a block size limit. The bandwidth is whatever anybody's willing to mine. So if you're willing to mine a terabyte block, okay. We have seen up to 30,000 transactions a second just on mainnet, just on a normal day, just people doing what they're doing on a Bitcoin network. This is just trading tokens. This is just that salmon company Unisat. This is just people that are trying to trade tokens with each other because they think something's cool. There's people paying for their coffee with the hand cash wallet. In a very basic sense, BSV is the stripped down, simplest implementation of Bitcoin in the universe, and it's the one that I like. Full disclosure. So what's what? We're looking at, what are these things? So no limit on Bitcoin SV, and it's a hard protocol. When you take the limits off of something, you don't have to tell it all the ways it needs to be limited. It's just emergent. It's like answering the question, how fast is a car? Well, your Toyota Corolla is a certain amount of fast, and your Ferrari is another certain amount of fast. How fast is a car going to be in 100 years from now? Well, maybe we won't have cars, and maybe we travel on beams of light or something. We shouldn't say that something is necessarily good because it's throttled. The other versions, as you can see, have soft protocols. They are in constant flux. They are changing all, but it's because they've got these limits. And so every time something needs to push one of those limits, you need to have a little civil war. Sometimes you get lucky and it's just a little political conversation, but it's typically a little civil war. So if you'd like to scan, this is your next opportunity to scan the QR code and download a Handcash wallet. If you download the Handcash wallet, I'd be very happy to send you a little bit of BSV so you can see what it's like to interact with the network. You want to send a transaction, you want to receive a transaction, you want to play a video game, you want to broadcast something cool to the blockchain, I can show you how to do that. You can also do that when the presentation here is totally done. And if you came here to learn how to buy Bitcoin, you can scan this QR code. It'll take you to Bittrex, and you can buy BTC, BCH, or BSV. Totally up to you. Right. This is not an investment presentation. I'm not telling you what to do with your money. In fact, you probably shouldn't listen to me when it comes to finances or investment, because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Any questions? Just check the troll box. Hard money. Let's see here. Pop up. Will work? There we go. Bendovier. Sounds like a real name. What does the concept of hard money mean? Okay, so what makes gold hard money? Doesn't change. You can check gold atomically, that it is a certain type of gold or quality of gold, and then you would serialize it and say, hey, this number signifies that this is this bar of gold and shouldn't be counterfeitable. If you start adding lead to it or silver to it, it starts to become something else. Hard money doesn't change. Gold has a definition. This is why gold is valuable over time. It doesn't rot. It doesn't change. It doesn't become something else if you do things to it. It's gold. Gold is gold. Gold is hard money because it's the same if you left it under the ocean for 1,000,000 years or buried in the backyard or if it's just in your pocket. The gold is the gold. It is hard money. Soft money is, what is a dollar? What is the purchasing power of my dollar? How many eggs does a dollar buy? Well, it's a very different answer in 1800 or 1900 or 2000 or 2023. You keep buying fewer and fewer eggs with your dollar. Well, why is that? Well, it's because the value of the dollar has changed from dollar is worth X amount of gold to dollar is worth X amount of silver to the dollar is worth X amount of some metals plus some credit to, okay, it's just credit. Okay, it's just not worth anything but a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. And you can trust us. And if anybody tries to not use a dollar, don't worry, we'll send in the Marines, right? And that's soft money, okay? So soft money changes. Soft money can be changed. It can be political. There is a board somewhere that says, what are the interest rates? Or what does this buy? Or who's in charge, right? So it is fundamentally political. In my opinion, the other versions of Bitcoin are soft money because, as we've seen, they can say, hey, let's just add a whole other Merkle tree and let's move signatures over here. And let's just keep changing stuff. Well, hard money doesn't change. The Taproot upgrade on BTC is like a year old. So when people say, oh, Bitcoin's the same forever, I say, well, what about the massive fundamental cryptographic change to the system that was added? Like, oh, well, it didn't break consensus, so it's not a change. It's like, well, okay. So make your own decisions. You have a
So somebody was saying something about being able to do smart contracts since 2015.
Yep.
Is that how it's conception?
So the question is, has Bitcoin been able to do smart contracts in 2015? Actually, it's been able to do smart contracts basically forever. From day one, you can tell a Bitcoin transaction. So in a Bitcoin transaction, you can add a piece of script, and that script can add a function. That function can be something as simple as create token, one token. Then with that token at the end of the script, you can tell it, okay, create another transaction. And so now you have a transaction that created a script that can create a transaction. You just created a machine. Well, what is a machine or what is a smart contract if not a machine on chain? So no, smart contract, a lot of people say that Ethereum created smart contracts. That is an abject fallacy. Bitcoin was capable of everything Ethereum was capable of, and it was capable of doing it 6 years before Ethereum, and it's more scalable, like exponentially more scalable. Any others? I think if you click the link I gave you, you can probably go in and put the question up on the screen, believe it or not. Check Skype. Yep.
Is it safe to say that currency is far less important than data?
So the question is, BTC people tend to talk about the currency, the coin aspect of things, whereas big blockers are much more likely to talk about data and entrepreneurial opportunities and things like that. Which is more valuable? I think the name is inherent. The name answers the question. It's a Bitcoin. So it is a coin made of data. A bit is the smallest piece of data. So it is a data coin or a data money. What is the thing that underpins Bitcoin's value? What is it? I think that it's computation. I think that it is the ability to compute anything or to add data to any transaction. If you can say that $1 is redeemable for $1 of gold anywhere in the world, then your Bitcoin is redeemable for whatever data it is storing. I would argue that they are inherently one and the same. It's a computational commodity. That is the commodity that Bitcoin is. So they will say that it's digital gold and nothing else. I would agree. It's digital gold, but then they ignore all the digital stuff. They're just like, no, it's just gold, man. It's just scarce. So it goes up in value because more people want it, and because it's scarce, price goes up. Yeah, sure. Price always goes up when the economy is, the dollars keep getting cheaper and cheaper, and interest rates keep getting lower and lower. But as we saw, quantitative tightening pushed prices down really, really hard for the last year or so. Now it's changed up a little bit because banks are collapsing, and that falls into the narrative of, oh my God, I need to get into this other monetary asset. But that's where we're at. So yeah, both and, I guess. Any other questions? Are you can join the StreamYard. Get in there, man. Say what? Hop in and post them up. It should let you right in. Here's a good one. How do you think people's general distrust of the current financial system has diluted people's perception of BSV? The BTC narrative is that it is that it is a asymmetric store of value against the collapse of the universe. As the world burns, Bitcoin thrives. That's their adage. I fundamentally disagree. I think Satoshi also fundamentally disagreed with that. He didn't like that stuff. He liked business. He wanted commerce on the internet. The problem is that the world might actually be collapsing, which is bad for business. So if you're one of those people that thrives when people got money to spend and people are excited to do business, well, it's not good when some of the biggest banks in the world are collapsing and the Fed's stepping in to create a few $1 trillion and do all that. That plays into the doomsday narrative that the BTC people own really, really hard. And frankly, it's true. I don't know that I want to be starting like a fun new restaurant if everybody's going to be broke for the next couple of years. Like that's just unfortunate. So that's a timing thing. And I think BSV is the entrepreneur system. It's the, hey, let's make the world a better place by reducing the friction of business. But if people are scared and they're really considering taking their savings and putting it into ammunition and water filtration, then that's not really good for your basic entrepreneurial spirit kind of thing. So that's where I'm at on that point. Beautiful. You guys are in. Is the BTC chain used, or is it SegWit that is running any service BTC has, if any, thus not Bitcoin technologically, basically? So SegWit is just a different signing mechanism. It's kind of like there's a secondary network on top of the network. So you can still use legacy Bitcoins on BTC. So you don't have to use the SegWit system, which is what proponents will say, well, we're not forcing you to use this new thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but I also can't resist you sending me a SegWit transaction either. You can send a SegWit transaction to a legacy node and whatever. It's convoluted and it's complicated because it's created by complicated and convoluted people. So yeah, SegWit isn't running anything really. It's just a way to eliminate transaction malleability so that you can lock things in smart contracts and put them on another network. That's the real reason SegWit was added to BTC, is they don't want transactions there. They want them on proprietary systems because this is how banking partners think. Like, remember, their big investors are people like MasterCard. So they want you to lock stuff up and spend on a card. Don't spend it on Bitcoin. Like, give us our cut still, please. That's the thought there. How can Bitcoin gain mass adoption if you can lose all your money by simply sending it to the wrong address? So it's an interesting conundrum, right? That's the problem with cryptography, is that it's absolute. If you lose your private keys, they're gone. How do you get them back? What do you do? Well, fortunately, like I said at the beginning, Satoshi Nakamoto was not super into the cryptography. He just liked the cryptography for the sake of generating key pairs. But what he actually talked about a lot was honest nodes. What can an honest node do? Can honest nodes do X? So honesty is not something that a computer participates in. Honesty is something that the programmer or the operator participates in. So he saw nodes primarily as a tool wielded by humans. Now, if Vlad over here loses his Bitcoin keys and says, Kurt, I can prove they were mine. Here's my receipt for buying them. Here's a photo of me taking them on vacation. Here's an attestation. Here's where I filed the taxes on them and it was accepted by the local tax agency. Here's all these attestations that these are my coins, but I lost my keys. Can I get these back? All right, well, let's go through a process. There are arbitration processes. Sometimes people lose the deed to their home, but they can prove it was their home, and they can prove that all these other things. You get a new deed issued, right? This is a process that exists. In my opinion, and in the opinion of a number of people in the BSV economy, that if you can go through all of the work to prove that those were your coins, there's not really a reason why nodes can't say, hey, those coins that are just locked over there because the keys are burned, we can just create a new private key and move them over here. Here's your new private key. You can use them. It can happen. It's not a practical or a technological limitation. It is a social limitation. And if we can get past the social mores of not your keys, not your coins, anything's possible. It's just a consensus network, which means if the nodes come to consensus or if we can agree, then there you go. You got your coins back. Anything else? We're at an hour and 15. It's a lot better than 90 minutes, but I'm getting to the point where people are going to start criticizing me again. Cool? One more. Kind of. So FedNow is a payment system put out by the Federal Reserve Bank. This is the bank that issues dollars in the United States. They have the sole permanent contract with the United States Treasury to issue dollars. They have created a digital payments network that allows you to have programmable money. A lot of the same features that I've been talking about on this presentation. Now what? Maybe we waited too long. Maybe Bitcoin has spent so long bickering about what it could do that the people at the Fed have said, okay, here's all the good ideas. We're going to take all those good ideas. We're going to get rid of all the nonsense stuff that we don't like or that pushes our power the wrong direction. And we're going to, give you a better money or better money. And I really don't like CBDCs. The governor of Florida just said 2 days ago, we're not participating in a central bank digital currency of Florida. Cool. Well, what's FedNow going to do about that? Are the Marines going to invade Florida? Maybe. We have had currency wars in this country before. So, it's a really weird one. Another one here. What do you think is the BTC Maxi principal misunderstanding about BSV that leads them to hate BSV so much? It's not even principle. It's politics. It's just like everything else. I don't hate BTC. In fact, I always say, you guys wouldn't help me keep BTC interesting. I'm here defending it. I think you, the advocates of BTC, are the ones attacking Bitcoin. I just think it's obvious. I think the purpose of Bitcoin is to do commerce on the internet and do all the fundamental things that were inherent in the network at the beginning. Well, that's a political position. It's just like anything else. It's like you can be religious of some regard and you can be pleasant about it, or you can be a prick. We can have politics about it. We can fight about it all day, or we can say, hey, maybe like Catholics and Protestants and Jews and Muslims can get together and have a food bank for the community because that's the right thing to do. So it really is up to us. The way that we treat each other is a personal decision. And the more we decide to be good to each other, the better we all get to live. So that's my position on it. Are you pro CBDC on BSV, or was that just Centi or Centi, not really BSV? I have very mixed feelings about the CBDC personally. I see in some regards, maybe it makes fiat currency better. Why? Because I can see how much of it is in circulation. If it's on a public blockchain. If it's on a public blockchain, you can audit supply, you know what the actual inflation rate is, you know the circulating supply, there are benefits to that. if the CBDC is pushed in such a way that my money can just be revoked, or don't pass some social credit score thing, or if I try to, break some weird gray market complicated rule somewhere, and like my quote unquote bank account just gets locked up automatically by some smart contract, like that's the kind of technocratic hell that I don't want to live in. And the fact of the matter is we don't know what any of it looks like. There's a lot of theories about what a CBDC world is going to look like, but not a lot of facts, because it's not like they're giving us the whole roadmap and signing a contract with us. I didn't wake up, or I wasn't born and then had the opportunity to participate in the Federal Reserve System. Like my parents said, we're going to give them a birth certificate, which is basically a debt note to the Fed. So, right. So it just, I don't know. If it's done well, great. But how many things are done well by the government? So that's where I'm at on it. Any others? We can wrap. I could use a drink of water. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. If you're watching the stream live, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and share across social media. Let the world know that we're going to do more lunch and learn stuff here at the South Florida Bitcoin Citadel. They're not all going to be Bitcoin 101. We can do little specialized modules, maybe things that are 30 minutes for everybody's sanity. So everybody, I'm Kurt Wicker Jr., reminding you and everyone else, please be good to each other, and goodbye.